2, 1.
Boom! Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, people of all ages, welcome to the Build and Grow with Real Estate Show. My name is Judah Hoover, and this guy right over here is Josh Weidman. I'm a real estate investor, and I'm also a realtor. Josh is a hard money lender and also a real estate investor. And as of recently, he's not only a homeowner, but he also lives in a home. If you've been following the show for any length of time, you know that Josh has been undergoing some major headaches and heartaches and hassles as he was finishing up a construction project. Guys, this show is all about teaching people how to make money from real estate and teaching people how to build wealth from real estate. So if real estate is your vocation, or real estate is your passion, or real estate is how you are going to create life-changing wealth, tag a friend, share this post. Tell other people who need to be on here and watching this that they should be checking this out as well, because Josh and I, we deliver great and amazing content, and that's really what it's all about.
Yeah, awesome. So typically on a regular week, we come to you Monday with some education stuff. We come back on Thursday and have a guest. Yesterday, we had a late cancellation, so we didn't end up moving forward with the show. But and then Fridays, we have a news roundup. And over the last couple of weeks, you know, Judah and I have been talking about picking out a significant story, something that has impact on the real estate industry, and kind of highlighting that, as well as bringing up a lot of the other things, because it gets kind of redundant. Saying, okay, well, you know, this month we've got X new unemployment, we got Y new jobs, and you know, so many new mortgage applications. Look, we all know that the real estate industry is booming right now. Let's take an eye a little bit deeper on some of the numbers and some of the things that matter, and you know, some news items that are impacting the week. So that's it. Anyway, yeah, let's do it. So the big news item for this week is some of the court rulings that have been coming out over the last several months that really have been unpredictable, conflicting, confusing, right, for the real estate industry as it relates to the eviction and foreclosure moratoriums. So, I mean, this has been crazy, right, Judah? Like, it's just been kind of a mess with everything that's come out.
Because how different cities are handling it, how different states are handling it, and I mean, there's and you know, there's everyone kind of knows by now, there's this like flyer that you can fill out, and if you fill it out, it says that you were negatively impacted by COVID, or you tried to make payment, whether you did or didn't, and whether anything or nothing can be true on it. And I've been in courtrooms where the judge just hands it to the tenant and say, here you go, sign this. They're supposed to have found it on their own, come up with it on their own, but like, judges are acting as counsel for the defense and handing them the piece of paper and say, here you go, sign this, and I cannot proceed with this. It's crazy.
Right. So, well, okay. So it is crazy, but at the same time, you know, we're going to talk about a couple aspects of this law and the way it's been implemented, and I don't even want to say law. Is it this moratorium, right? And some of the ways it's being implemented, and how that conflicting information is really causing a wild west out there for everybody involved. So, all right, so all of this kind of came to a head, and I say came to a head. It started hitting the news in February because a federal judge in Texas in February came out, and he ruled that this moratorium on evictions and foreclosures was unconstitutional. And you know, while he said, look,
specifically because the CDC is granted powers, and the CDC is the Centers for Disease Control is granted powers to control pandemics and diseases and do whatever it takes to do that. And they determined that if we had people being evicted, moving from one house to another, that would mean that there's more people out there moving around and stuff like that, and that wouldn't be a good thing. And if we were a society right now that was under lockdown or under shelter in place or under anything like that, that would kind of make sense. But like, we're kind of in this quasi zone, right? Where like we can go out to eat, we can go to the grocery store, and we can go to work. So like, what the CDC is using as justification doesn't make sense because we're not under a strict lockdown right now. So evicting somebody from their house doesn't spread COVID any more than going to the grocery store, going to a restaurant, or things like that.
Well, and I think that initially the thought was we don't want to create a lot more homelessness, and that
but then you need to do that through like the executive branch or do that through passing a law or whatever. They went through the CDC because they could get away with the justification of evicting people causes people out of their houses. We want people to stay in their houses for 20 hours a day, and that's going to spread COVID. Well, that's not justification that stands up.
Right. And essentially the federal judge was saying, look, we understand why you're doing it. We understand, the impetus to get this done and keep everybody safe and all that kind of stuff, but the Constitution,
right?
And that's really what this boiled down to. Is he said, look, even though I loved what he said. Okay, although the COVID-19 pandemic persists, so does the Constitution.
Right.
And that was his ruling. All right. Now, regardless of what you think about this is contrary to what the purpose of the federal or the proposed purpose of the federal government, what they're trying to do here.
Right.
And it becomes the first point of conflict. Now, you would think that some judges in local municipalities or states would look at this as guidance, I guess, but we've got absolutely the opposite end of the spectrum here. If you look, there was a bunch of reports that came out of New York City of some really interesting interpretations of this law. All right. So tenants, actually conflicting and confusing, whatever. So Dream Hotels downtown versus Philippe Chow. It's like a high-end restaurant in downtown New York, right? The plaintiff, the hotel, they want their money. They haven't been paid rent, all this and that. Well, the defendant is claiming that part of the lease, there's a casualty clause within the lease that stipulates, hey, if these types of things happen that cause the business to close down, like a fire, right? There's a fire in the building, you can't use the facilities, hey, we don't have to pay rent during that time. They're trying to argue that the pandemic shutdowns should fall under that casualty clause of the lease. And I mean, that's a really big deal if that were to be accepted. Now, the judge threw it out, but it's one of the things that is being brought up is like, what's the way around this? What are the unintended consequences of these shutdowns?
My understanding about this case is, though, it was kind of a good thing. Like the judge kind of split the baby in half, right?
Not with this one, though. Not with this one. This one, like there was a bunch coming out of New York. With this one,
let me say it this way. Yeah. Josh, if I'm a business and I rent space from you for 10 years at $1,000 a month, I owe you $120,000, period, the end. We've decided that how I'm going to pay that $120,000 is $1,000 a month over the next 10 years.
Right.
But I owe you a debt of $120,000. If I were to break that lease, guess what? I still have to pay you $120,000. So my understanding of what the judge is saying here is will allow you out of the lease, out of the back portion of that, so that their hotel can't come after them for that. I could be wrong. I'm not a legal scholar or anything like that. But commercial leases are different than residential leases. Residential leases, you can't go after the trailing part of the lease after the vacant. Commercial leases, you absolutely can.
100%. And in this specific case, the judge, they found 100% for Dream Hotels downtown. I mean, they were liable for everything. And this is just a snippet. And she just says, look, hey, this is what the lease says. You either pay or you get out. That's it.
I got you.
that kind of thing. But then we've got the opposite end of the spectrum. Also in New York, in Brooklyn, you've got a 267 development versus Brooklyn Babies and Toddlers. The tenant was the daycare. Well, the judge ruled in their favor. Hey, look, it's basically, you said the place has been rendered inaccessible. It's not a functional business. You can't use it for that. Therefore, they don't have to pay the rent. And here's what's really crazy.
And furthermore, the landlord engaged in harassment.
Yes, right. And so what has been happening here is that in New York specifically, you have a situation where landlords, if they even approach the tenant to collect their rent, it can fall under harassment. And with harassment, I mean, that's look, if somebody says you're harassing them and you're not really, it's like water off a duck's back. Yeah, I don't care what you think. I need to get my rent, right? At the same time, under harassment, what we're talking about in a legal term, and as it relates here, you're talking about tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars in damages and fines because of these kind of actions. Just asking for the rent, it's pretty nuts.
Right. Yeah. Well, I don't know the specifics of how they did it and stuff like that, but I mean, you can't, you can't do things like remove a door from a property and take it back to your office to fix it. So there's some things that landlords try to do very frequently to get cute, and they end up getting themselves in trouble. And where you see this a lot is when you have squatters in a property. Sometimes owners will get a little bit aggressive.
Yes.
And that is very unfortunate. And I mean, you can see $3,000 to $5,000 to $10,000 worth of civil fines in those cases. So if you have squatters in your property and they won't get out, do not take matters into your own hands. Judges hate that because judges feel like it's their job to decide who's right and who's wrong here. And when you overstep, the court doesn't like it when you infringe on their territory.
Well, and so here's what's really crazy here. I highlighted these two stories, but there's probably, if you Google this, there's probably 50 stories about these.
Because you highlighted these because they're at the opposite ends of the spectrum. There's all kinds of stuff here as well.
But here's the point. With these judgments, with these judges coming out, and you've got two judges in the same city giving completely opposite ends of the spectrum decisions for, on these cases that seem pretty similar. And then you've got things all the way in between. I read an article about this, the judge found on the side of the landlord, but then reduced the back rent due by 75%. So they were paying 25% of the back due, even though the landlord wins the case. I mean, it's just, there's no rhyme or reason, it seems, to these judgments. And so what do we have? What comes about? You got tenants taking advantage of the law.
Right.
I mean, right now in California, it is a nightmare. There are people that settled on a house, everything settles, everybody got their money, everybody got paid off, and then somebody refuses to move out. A woman here, she rented a room in her house to a friend, somebody at arm's length. They get into a conflict. The woman starts threatening her, the life of her kids and her family and things like that. The landlord-tenant law falls on the side of the tenant, and because there's no eviction, she spent like $8,000 trying to get this woman out of her house, and it ends up in her moving out of the house with her kids. So it's just crazy. You got a lot of stuff going on in New York with the commercial and residential landlords. We talked about that. And how about this? In Miami, courts are so overwhelmed with eviction filings that they're backlogged for 12 months right now.
Wow.
Right?
That's crazy.
12 months. So, I mean, there's just a lot of stuff going on that are related to, these type of moratoriums that, the longer this goes on, we've talked in the past about how a lot of these things end up working themselves out. Well, the longer they go on, I think that the people that have a workout plan, I think they end up taking care of it, right?
Yep.
But you get to a certain point where the people that are most impacted and haven't worked it out, they don't have a plan, and there probably isn't one.
And here's the worst part about this, right? So it affects all of us. It hurts
Right.
all of us. We all end up suffering from this, and who suffers the most is not even the good landlords. Who suffers the most are all tenants everywhere, because when you borrow money, right, you're paying for three things. You're paying for the cost of that money, wherever, if they have to, if you have to pay, like if I borrow money from Josh, right, I have to pay Josh 10% because that's what he's paying his investor. I have to pay Josh 3% on top of that because that's his profit. But then I also have to pay 1% because that's his overhead and operation, right? So we're up to 14%. 10% is what Josh pays to his investor. That's the hard cost of his money. 3% is his profit, and he certainly deserves a profit. 1%, I'm making up numbers. I'm not saying that these are actually hard money bankers, right? 1% for overhead and marketing and costs and all that stuff, but also 1 or 2% to pay for loss. Because Josh takes the loss of this loan and it's spread out across all these other loans. That's exactly what happens when we have bad tenants. It slowly, and it's not just your portfolio, it's spread out across the whole marketplace of portfolios when we're not able to get right. So you know who pays for foreclosures? People who pay their mortgage on time. You know who pays for evictions? People who pay their rent on time.
Well, and you know what?
For lost rent? People who actually pay their rent.
Judah, how about this? This is why it's important to investigate the banks that you're working with. Investigate the people on your dream team, the people that are helping you be successful. If your bank has a high default rate,
right?
Yeah, it means they did a bunch of loans, but it also means they charge a bunch of fees to cover all of the bad loans that are in there because they're making money if they're around, right? I mean, thankfully, we have a super, super low default rate, so it's not even an issue. But it's one of those things that, like, you got to take into consideration. A lot of people think, oh, well, the government backs my bank. Why does it matter to me? Well, it does. All these things.
Because even though the government backs the bank, that's like filing for bankruptcy. You know what I mean? It's like you're done. If you have to make a claim to the FDIC, deposit insurance. I mean, if you have to make a claim to them to stay solvent and stuff like that, like you're toast. The bank is going to, even if the bank survives, they're going to be watching over you and everything like that. And the point is, when people do not pay the rent and we say, yeah, they're sticking it to the man, what people don't realize is we collectively are the man that got stuck to.
That's exactly right. All right. So we've talked a bunch about the increase in construction costs, right? Over the last couple of weeks and months, I've been shocked at some of the increases in costs of my own project. But more than that, across the industry, we are in such a unique and really not great position in the market right now, where we've got this squeeze between this need and this demand for additional housing. We've got super low inventory, so anything that hits the market's gobbled up. We have builders that would love to build, but the cost of construction continues to go up to a point where it's not feasible. It's no longer feasible for them to do new construction and sell them on the market for, even with this ridiculously high demand.
Right.
There was a report that, so this is based on a report compiled for the construction industry by, it's HIS Market and the Procurement Executives Group. Sounds really
purchasers, official. Essentially.
Yeah, exactly. The bottom line is they went through and they polled their all of their clients, right? They reached out to all these people in the industry to see what was happening and what they were seeing. And first of all, January 2021 was the first time since 2018 where we saw an increase in expenses and construction costs during the month of January. So we didn't expect to see an additional increase in February. Well, it did. It came in, right? And specifically, they noted that the cost of copper, which is going to affect, cost of computing. It's also going to affect the cost of wiring in your property.
Yeah, they refer to copper. I mean, there's a lot of people who track commodities, and they always refer to copper as Dr. Copper, because the price of copper is a good indicator of the health of the economy. And so copper prices going up means that there's an imbalance in supply and demand, and there's a lot of demand out there right now that can't be met by the supply.
So, all right, so we go through here, and you've got, I mean, you look at these things, these are like core fundamental items that you need with building. You've got carbon steel pipe, you got fabricated structural steel, and transformers. Transformers, I don't know if you remember this or not, but there was several years ago, it might have been 2 decades.
I mean, like Optimus Prime. Were you? Is that where you're going with this? I mean, my kid's like Bumblebee. What is that?
Well, no. Here's where I'm going with this. There were a bunch of storms in a short period of time, and it affected the electrical grid to a point, and that juxtaposed with a really hot summer that caused really large taxes on the electrical grid. And what we found is that we could not import transformers. We could not find them. They were like, we ran out. And so you might not have electric in your neighborhood for 6 months while we wait for them to be built and shipped and arrive and installed.
Wow.
Right? I mean, and this was in a very small, geographic locations, but I remember it, and I remember thinking, man, that's odd. We can't get, something as elemental as a transformer, and like they're outside of your house, they're on the telephone poles, and you can't use the electric on the line without one, right? So anyway, I think it's interesting to see that, because I think that what we can infer here are two things from these rising construction costs. Number one, the supply chain sure as heck isn't fixed, and the demand for construction related materials across the globe has increased, right? And so if we're seeing shortages in supply chain and in demand, or increases in demand, you're going to see increases in prices, right? Of course. But then we also have all of these stimulus funds and everything being pumped into the economy. And we've talked a lot about inflation over the last couple months, as these stimuli have been hitting the market, and as construction, or not construction, but real estate prices have gone up.
Yeah, I think we're going to continue to see prices go up. It's funny that one of your bullet points here is this ocean freight price increases. Are you familiar with what's going on in the Suez Canal right now? Have you seen that?
No.
Dude, there is a huge ship that's sideways in the Suez Canal.
Oh,
and like so there's like several hundred container ships backed up in the Mediterranean and in the Gulf. Several hundred. They're using tugboats to try and get it out and everything like that. They think it could be another 3 or 4 days. And again, that's just the type of thing that causes ripples. You know what I mean? Because if you want to make your widget and you're waiting on a part to do that, that means that I can't make that, which means that I can't,
So, check this out. So this is where we're at, right? So I was talking to an HVAC contractor, right? He was working on my heating and air conditioning.
Right.
And he was telling me that at his shop, they have 4 or 5 brand new units for each of the type of units that they sell. And that's generally fine. It's not a big deal, right? Well, during the whole pandemic shutdown, a lot of these manufacturers and secondary manufacturers weren't making replacement parts. And so he'd be on a service call and call into the office, and they say, yeah, we can't get that part for 5 months, 6 months. They can't tell me when it comes in. So he goes in and he salvages the stuff off these new units. And, it's not a big deal. He knows what he's doing. He takes this part here, that part there, whatever. Well, we're still not back to the point where we're in full production mode. And Now he's got 4 of each type of unit sitting out here that are half salvaged and sitting there, and he doesn't have the backup parts anymore. So
Right.
when you call, you call over to the supply house, they don't have them. They're calling to the manufacturer, and the manufacturer says, "Yeah, we'll get them to you when we can." And now you got to ship in the Suez Canal sideways, and it's like, oh, that's 3 more weeks.
Yeah, well, because we shifted our economy to making ventilators about a year ago, and we all did that for a couple of months. And a lot of factories were deemed non-essential and just decided to shut down. And a lot of raw material gathering and processing and transportation stopped, not just in the US, but globally. This was a global pandemic. And it's going to take, I mean, I hate to use another super carrier analogy, but like it takes a long time for those things to steer or stop or start. And the global economy, the global supply chain is very similar. I needed a washer for my house. I called 3 different places. I heard one say 6 weeks, one say 4 weeks. One, I was very hopeful, said, well, I can probably get you one in about 2 weeks, and then we'll schedule it, and we're scheduled out about 2 to 3 weeks after that. I'm like, wait, that's still 5 weeks. Like,
dude, I got one for you, right? And keep going. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
Well, but the bottom line on that was I have 4 kids. Like being without a washer and dryer is not an option. So yeah. I mean, they go through clothes. So and they don't change halfway through the day. Like they wear, but mind-boggling. So I ended up having a friend who used to be in the appliance repair business who's gotten out of it. He was like, hey, I'll do you a solid. I'll come and repair yours. I don't really do this much for any people anymore. And so he like, I have like a Frankenstein dryer or I guess we're close to Easter. Let's call it the Jesus dryer because it's been brought back to life. It's been resurrected and it is doing good work again.
Dude, it's okay. I'm not going to tell my story because the last bullet point on this whole slide,
right?
It seemingly has nothing to do with this conversation, except it's such a huge bullet point. For the last 25 years, maybe 30 years,
right?
Most of our society has been a college track type educational system.
Right.
And that's not true for everybody, but a lot of schools and communities have transitioned from graduates doing all sorts of diverse things to everybody goes to college, they get a degree, and then they go on and after they spend $200,000.
Right.
Subcontractors, good tradespeople are in such demand that right now, one of the largest increases that this report noted was in the cost of subcontract work. And they projected out that there would be, their subcontract work went up by 5.6% in a month. And maybe it's an anomaly, who knows, but they expected another 5 to 10% increase over the next 6 months with the trend continuing through 2023.
Yeah.
And I think that in 2008, when there was that huge collapse, one of the biggest parts of the industry that was destroyed was the construction industry.
Yep.
And contractors that have been around for years, they could not, they couldn't find a dollar to put their hand on. They were driven out of the industry. And so we were left with a much smaller pool, small pool
and
of
also
a small
no one
pool.
wanted to get into that industry.
Right, exactly. And so essentially what I'm saying is if you are looking at graduating in the next couple years, if you're trying to consider what you want to do as a profession, find a trade that you really love, something that you can really get behind. You can start making money at 18.
A plumber, a mechanic, all things are a roofer, a bricklayer, like all of these things are what we need more of. A salesman, I mean, like a trade. What's funny about this, Josh, and I know we don't have much time, but like, because of my political ideology, like I'm supposed to be against college. I'm actually not. I love the concept and the idea of higher education. I just hate what higher education has become. You know what I mean? College is supposed to be someplace where you go and get well-rounded, you get exposed to different ideas, read books that you wouldn't necessarily otherwise do. And unfortunately, it's become, because we've wanted everyone to go to college, we've really watered it down to make anybody able to go to college, and therefore it's lost its value to the people who should be going to college, and it's lost its well-roundedness.
So I think the core problem with college right now is it's become what you described. Oh, it's a place for you to go and find yourself and read good books and find out something. That's awesome. But if it's 50 grand a year, maybe you should have a job before you go there.
Yes.
Like, that sounds like a retirement. It's like pre-retirement.
I'm not.
I get it. I understand.
You know what I mean? Like, college is supposed to do for you like what traveling around the world. You know, I've told my kids, like, take the money you would spend on college,
yes,
and spend 2 years traveling the world. Like, it's about just experiencing life and seeing stuff and being around people and broadening your horizons. And it's not that right now.
That's the perfect segue into our next point of the next and last point on our day today, right?
Yeah. Our last point is it Elon Musk?
No, I know. Listen.
Gosh, we have viewers tune in every Friday for the Elon Musk news of the week, and you are disappointing them.
Oh my gosh, I know. Listen, you're going to have to Google search on your end. This one, though, I thought this was so relevant, and it's not too heavy, but all right. Imagine spending real life money to buy a house online, virtually, right? Like, it seems pretty silly, right? That's my 2 cents until I started looking into this a little bit more. So there are these things called NFTs, or non-fungible tokens. Yep. Essentially, it combines the idea of a digital something, they call it a digital asset, right? And the blockchain, combining those together, you can buy a digital asset online. And I think Christie's
here's an example. Here's an example. Let's talk about like what this looks like in real life. And this is my best understanding, the best way I can take it. If I take a picture of Josh, and I'm Judah Hoover, I'm a famous photographer, and I take a picture of Josh, well, I can email that picture to 800 people, right? And all of them have an exact digital copy of that picture. Right. Or I can use blockchain to encode one of those pictures, and this is like the picture of Josh. There's only one picture of Josh, and this is what it is. And so even though there can be copies of it and copies that look exactly the same, this is the one digital picture that the other copies were made from.
Yeah, and okay, so in the context of the art world, I don't really get it. That's my 2 cents. Fine. But in the context of virtual real estate, it's pretty doggone interesting.
Yes.
My son loves, oh my gosh, I blanked and I can't remember the name of the video game. It's an online game where you fly in to this world and you shoot people.
Sounds like every video game ever. Good job.
I know. Sorry. Anyway, long story short, you can go into these buildings. Yeah, I'm talking about Fortnite. Dear goodness, thank you. All right, so watch this. Imagine being able to buy a plot of land or a building in Fortnite, right? Sounds pretty stupid. Hey, what the heck am I going to do with that?
Right.
But a lot of these developers, what they're doing is allowing for blank space, so you can do whatever you want there. You can build whatever you want. And so on the ground level, just the basics, imagine building a building and on the side of it, there's a big mural with an advertisement for a company. And so every single person that logs into Fortnite is going to see your advertisement. And since you own that building, that virtual building, you can charge money for that space. I mean, and it's eyeballs. It's a whole new way of making money online. It's pretty interesting. But the other thing that they were pushing on is, like, there are a lot of people that have grown up in the video game space, and they already have this online virtual life. And with the integration of Bitcoin and the blockchain and some of the things like that, you have retailers that are already developing like three-dimensional models of stores where you can virtually try things on and see what you look like in them, things like that. So what they're proposing is like, you buy this plot of land and maybe there's a building there, maybe there's not, but you could sell virtual retail space inside that game. So like if you're putting on different skins or different guns or whatever that you're selling in that space, you've got a retail space with zero upkeep. You know, I mean, how is it? You don't have any leaky roofs. You know, if you have a squawking tenant, digitally you can change them out in a second. And right. I'll bet you'd even have the type of scenario where you could geo-target or target specific types of potential clients, you know what I mean, and team them up based on their user habits and things like that. I don't know. It just seems pretty cool.
It very much could be. That's also technology that could then be fractionalized, because if you have something that is a space, you can say, I'm going to just to make it as simple as possible, I'm going to sell this space. And Josh can make it look like whatever he wants it to look like to women gamers, and Jeremy Bayshore can make it look like whatever he wants it to look like to men gamers. And so you can actually not just, I'm going to sell the whole thing to Josh and he can split test it. Whoever owns the real estate can divide and conquer that way.
I mean, yeah, and it's pretty awesome. You think about it. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Ready Player One.
I haven't. It's on my list. I do want to see it.
Read the book first. The book is so much better, and the movie's good. So read the book too. But it's this world where the universe, there's a parallel universe, so to speak, right, online, where you live virtually, and the world around us has degenerated to such a point where online is preferable to offline, and people live through it. It's pretty interesting stuff. Pretty cool. Yep. Anyway, sorry. I went long. Lots to talk about today. Really good stuff. Judah, what do you got going on for the rest of the weekend? Anything fun?
Nothing. I get these chemistry kits with my kids called Mel Chemistry. They're freaking awesome. And we're like 2 or 3 kits behind right now. So I'm going to be doing chemistry experimentation with my kids and having a great time with that.
What was that called again?
Mel Chemistry.
Okay.
Dude, it's like $35 a month, and they send you a new chemistry experiment every single month to try out with your kids. And when you first sign up, they send you like the starter kit. And so there's like some stuff in there that you might need, or parts of it you might need for other ones. But then every month they're just like, hey, here's a little bit of this. And there's an app you download and it just walks you through exactly what to do and how to do it.
Did you rub your nerd off on your kids just like I did?
I'm trying as hard as I can.
That's right. I love it. That's really cool. Awesome. Have a good time. All right. Yeah, that's it. We'll be back here Monday talking content and education. Till then, if you need a hard money loan, give me a call. You need you need a list or sell a property, give Judah a call. Have a great weekend. Go make some money. See ya.
See you, everybody.